I want to welcome all of you to this session, Guiding the Way, Best Practices for Effective Engaging Leadership in Research Administration. And it is presented by Jessi Fuentes and Eugene Kelly. So why don't you two, one, Jessi, maybe tell Gene a little bit about this.
About what we're doing.
and introduce yourselves too, please.
Can you give us a little history of the RAM Symposium? I mean, just so he knows that side too.
So I want to say the first RAM Symposium, 2017 or 2018. And and we've had it then kind of biannually, not biannually, since then. And it is, RAM Symposium is more intermediate subject matter in research administration for research administrators. So your audience today, Gene, is mainly made up of departmental and college and central research administrators. So, the Jessies, the Paulas in your case, Cliff, but then also like the OSP people. There's quite a few OSP folks who have joined us in this as well. But we try to present things that are timely, and these sessions have proven to be even more timely than what we thought they were going to be when we started talking about them last fall. And we also put on another session or workshop, which is called Fundamentals, which is more real basic things about research administration for more newer research administrators who come into the field, because, a lot of us come into this not because we went to school to be a research administrator, not because we necessarily sometimes even chose to be a research administrator. We took a job and that's what we ended up being.
So my name's Jessi Fuentes. I'm going to show kind of our org chart later. I am basically the business officer for the College of Ag and the Ag Experiment Station. And I invited to present with me Gene Kelly because he's the director of our Ag Experiment Station. And we really, because of the timeliness and what's going on, the whole goal of this session is to explore effective strategies for building strong collaboration partnerships between research administrators and like your institution and college leadership. And Gene has been around. Like, he knows this place. He's the expert in the field, I promise. But he knows how to navigate the things. He knows how to work internally in a college or experiment station setting, and he knows how to go upwards and know where, like, what voices to talk to. The other thing he knows is how to bring in funding, even when it's a super changing dynamic. He's been there, done that. I joke with him about, we have a couple, but his name is one that I'm like, just put Gene's name on it, and we've just increased our chances of getting whatever grant it is, no matter what it is. Actually, just put Gene's name on it. And also, so I'm going to have Gene take it away, but he is gracious enough to give of his time while he's in DC at the National Academy of Science. So Gene, can you give this group a little bit about you?
I'll give everybody my background. I'm a professor. I was originally a professor of soil. I'm still a professor of soil science. So everything at CSU I've done has been grassroots. I started out in undergraduate, came back, did one graduate degree, did a graduate degree away, came back. So I know the institution for a long time. But in my role as a faculty member, I was highly dependent on administrative supporters. I mean, you're the people that essentially run the department. I mean, that's my view. And so that's what I learned early on. And I think that was part of my, I guess you would call it success in moving up professionally and being relatively productive, was because I used administrators and was able to communicate with administrative staff that were, very well skilled in what they were having to work on. And then I became a department head for 5 years, and I did that over in soils and crop sciences, and that was a horrifying experience for somebody like myself. I mean, that was the hardest job. So those of you that are administrative support for department heads, bless you. Okay, I know how hard that job is. I was department head. I did that for 5 years, and then I went out and worked. I ran a big research program for the National Science Foundation for 2 years, something called NEON. That was a $500 million project. That's where I cut my teeth in big science and that, and then came back as the deputy director of the experiment station. So I left the ranks of department head, became like a deputy to the director of the experiment station and the dean, and then had to work with department heads in a different capacity. So I got to see the university in that realm. And then most recently, I was made the director of the experiment station, and I worked closely with Dean Lawrence Dill. But in my role as director of the experiment station, now I interact with all the deans. And the cool thing is I'm not a dean. So I get to interact with them, but I don't have to hang out with them. I just have to work with them, that kind of a thing. So those of you that are assistants to the deans, bless you as well. Okay. So anyway, and all kidding aside, I think that what I've learned, and then we can get into some Q&A or whatever else you want me to talk about, is that I think what really works in the role of an administrator with an administrative support staff is really having trust. I trust Jessi and my staff over in ABC. They're just remarkable in the way that they deliver, and they are highly professional, and they really understand the way the university works. And I think that's why we get along so well, because we all know where the bottlenecks are when we're trying to get things done. If we need to get something done at the departmental level, that's a completely different sort of array of skill sets than if you're looking at the dean level and God forbid, across college or university wide. What you'll find is that most department heads and deans, I'm just going to say this. This is not recorded, is it?
Do we need to stop it?
No, I'm just kidding. I don't really care. I don't care. Anyway, is that, most, I would say most administrators at the university are academics first, administrators second. So I am a great example of somebody who's been very lucky to have great administrative support, because I'm a horrible administrator. I am really bad at it. Like I'm a good leader. I'm good at leading. I like telling people what to do. I have good ideas and all that. But being an administrator is very taxing, and it takes a lot of discipline, and there's a skill set that you have to develop over time. I'm a better administrator now than I was when I first started. But anyway, so I think what it is there are different kinds of skill sets of administrators, but I think the administrative support is fundamentally the same thing. It's really understanding, the complexity of the job, the complexity of the unit you're managing, the interactions of the people within the unit you're working with, and then also this idea of having to support other entities like a department or a college or a research center. And so I have always found that the best advice for research administrators is to sort of don't be afraid to be the lead. I mean, there's nothing wrong with leading. I think leading is a really important thing. The old adage, if you're not the lead in the pack, the view never changes, right? So so I think really being a leader is an important thing, and having the agency to do that with your administrator or whatever administrator you're supporting. So anyway, I think that's a bit of an introduction, and I've gotten too far. So Jessi, why don't you take over, and then I'll jump in when you need me.
Yeah, and I'll tie in. So I know most people on this call probably has no idea what the Ag Experiment Station is.
Oh,
and so
okay.
Dean, or Gene being the director of it, the big thing I want to tie in, and he can tell a little bit more, is for the College of Ag Sciences, it is literally our arm to do research, period. Like, all of our faculty have to work in conjunction with objectives of the Ag Experiment Station. And so he has a very, very outward facing research focus, even with all his other experience.
Yeah. And so I think what Jessi is reiterating on is that we get money from the federal government that comes through, you hear our presidents always talk about the Morrill Act and the Hatch Act and the McIntyre-Stennis Act and the Smith-Labor. Those are all the monies that come from the federal government. They come to CSU under one umbrella, and then the state of Colorado matches those dollars, and they match them 2-to-1 in Colorado. So those are matched, and those monies come to Jessi and I. And then what we have to do is we give those dollars out to different faculty in the College of Ag and across the 7 colleges. And what my job is as the administrator is to make sure that those dollars are mapped to the priorities of the federal government. The federal government gives us some different pillars that we have to use the money for. And then what we try to do is to have the faculty, align their programs with these funding opportunities. And then that's the way we justify paying faculty. And well, we have to do it. I mean, we spend most of our time reporting to the federal government for the way we're using their money and also the match dollars. So my job as an administrator, more so than ever, is to really look over the science and make sure that my scientists are presenting their results in a way that a legislator could understand it, or a secretary of agriculture, or somebody back at NEFA. So they need to know exactly what that person's been working on. And so this requires us, Jessi and I, to work not only across across departments within the college, across the research centers which go around the state, and then even bigger is across all of the colleges, right? So we weave ourselves into the colleges, and then in fact, Jessi, right, multi-states. So we work with multi-state awards. We have awards that go among universities in the Western region as well. So my job is to sort of make sure that all of those programs are aligned and federal dollars are being spent on science. Jessi's job is to balance the budgets, and my administrative staff is really there for scheduling, reporting, making sure that everybody's staying on task with the scope of work that they're doing, right? So we really do report on scope of work and what the objectives are and what the progress is. And that's what we report on every year. Yeah.
And we use like the way that just the experiment station runs, like the funds that Gene was talking about is literally how land grants are formed. Land grant universities, every land grant will have an ag experiment station and an extension component. That is what makes a land grant a land grant. And so we have to live that sort of mission every single day. And they are federal dollars that have a state match component. And so everything we talk about is basically under the umbrella of uniform guidance and research.
The reason we're different is because those dollars come to us and they're under my name. So I am responsible. So if anything gets messed up, I go to jail, right? Lawrence Dean, the dean doesn't go to jail. The dean and Art doesn't go to jail. I'm the one who goes to jail. So my responsibility is to be I don't want to use a weird word, like a gatekeeper. I have to make sure that those dollars are spent appropriately and that they're used right. And so people are always asking me really detailed questions about them, and there's really not a lot of detail to it. It's like you just sort of, we have it in these different buckets. We have to make sure we spend the buckets appropriately, and then we make sure we do all the reporting on that. So there's always people like, our upper administration thinks that this is just a bank account that we
nice
just have,
slush fund.
We just write checks out to people. But, our money is allocated to departments and colleges, and it provides an enormous amount of faculty support, many times salaries for faculty, and supporting all the facilities that we have at the university. And again, Jessi is right. This is the backbone of the university's funding. And in the land grant mission, we report to the land grant mission. The other colleges, in a sense, don't have that obligation. We have the obligation to report in the land grant mission in terms of the money we get from the federal government. So that's kind of a little bit different. So we're viewed a little differently in the College of Ag. And I've been very blessed to, I mean this in a real way. I've been really lucky to have almost every job on campus where I've worked at some level of the administration and just seeing how the university works. So I think I have a really good understanding of how it works and how it doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Gene just gave us a really great overview of his background stuff, and we do want this session to be interactive. I'm going to go through a couple little things just to give you a little bit more background. But Gene does have that various experience from kind of that department head level all the way up and working with other leadership in the university. And I think you can probably tell that he's going to be open. He'll answer some questions. And we really wanted to key in that I just came from the department research administrative session where we were talking with, DRAs and about challenges of really being in the weeds at what's going on right now. And a lot of times, like in those positions, you're looking to leadership to help guide. And so we wanted to give some general access to here's some maybe best practices. Like Gene could ask you, what is a good way for me to ask the department head this sort of thing? Start thinking of questions if you want that. Like this is not your department head, not someone you're directly working with. But if you would like to get some good candid advice between Gene and I think that, we're definitely willing to help try to guide on some kind of crucial conversations of what's going on right now. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. I put our org chart here. We, in the College of Ag and Experiment Station, we do have a fairly centralized service. And so I report directly to our dean, and Gene is kind of right here on here, and he also reports directly to the dean. And so we both work very, very closely together. Our offices are like 3 down the hall. And then this Amy Tarkowski is our rad, and she's 2 offices down. And I know we're in kind of a virtual space for a lot of people. A lot of people work hybrid and whatnot, but running into leadership is a nice thing. Like you can get a lot of conversations done in a water cooler type fashion. I know not a lot of people have the ability to do that. And so under me, I have HR. We have our Cliff Schulenberg might be on this call, but he's our manager of grant facilitation, which does all our pre-award. And then we also have all accounting and all business management under me, which is also done in hybrid cubicle offices, like right outside Gene's office. And so we just have the benefit of overlapping a lot and being able to talk and problem solve a lot. And I know that doesn't work everywhere, but I did want to give you guys kind of an idea of what our structure is, to know that in some ways we can do what we do literally just because location matters and we're able to have conversations in certain ways. Okay, so why we're doing this now is, without, going down further, we are in unprecedented times. And we are in unprecedented times, especially here at CSU. Like we are doing lots of change all over the place. Research funding is one huge component, and we would like to change decades of not changing anything and try to change everything right now. So there's lots of stuff going on, and being able to have a voice and connect with leadership matters. We need to manage risks big time, and we need to be able to figure out how to take risks. And that's another difficult thing. I think leadership is always trying to figure out how to kind of manage that, because we're living in a world where we can't predict what we thought we could predict once. The ability to go, oh yeah, I've submitted this many proposals and I have kind of a return rate of this, and we're just going to start kind of projecting off that. We don't have a lot of confidence around that. And so what do we do as colleges, as PIs, as units, as unit administrators to help guide in this kind of unpredictable world? And then as the university keeps telling over and over, no matter what, from what avenue you ask, there really isn't bridge funding in general. And CSU doesn't have the magical pot of money, even though, like Gene was saying, people keep coming to, oh, well, go to the experiment station, go to the dean's office, go to the BPR. And everyone's like, where's the money to just help us get through anything? So none of that actually exists. And like we need to come together. Like it's the only way to kind of get through and pivot and change and do things like that. And people in Gene's position are really pivotal in being able to guide a lot of those conversations and stabilize something that's really unstable at the moment. And like the last session, we talked a ton about stress and managing change and all those things. I would say, like, a huge part of that is what Gene was talking. Trust is such a big deal, and being able to find, do you have the department head that you can go to? Do you have a director, a dean, a rad? Like, what's the relationship with those sorts of things? Do you have, like, is your supervisor above? Do they have those sorts of relationships established so that so Gene, I was talking last session, when last week comes that we lose $8 million in one fell swoop, we're not actually completely all freaking out. We know we're freaking out, but we know we can come together and figure out a plan. And so being able to manage these unexpected changes is kind of what we want to focus on, and what we want to let you have an opportunity to ask questions and get advice on.
I think Jessi, the other thing too is that, I was giving a similar talk this morning about, because a lot of the people back here are wondering, like, how are the universities dealing with it? And, we're different, but we're pretty, very, very similar experiences with other universities across the countries. All the universities are experiencing the loss in federal funding. All the
Yep.
universities that are state universities have state budget cuts, even places like Nebraska and places like Iowa and Montana.
Yeah.
There are cuts because the federal funding that affects things like Medicare has to be picked up by the state. So if they're not sharing, if the federal government stops funding certain programs, the state has to pay for those, right? So education gets cut. And I think the challenge that we have as administrators is to communicate with our staff that everything will be fine. We'll always try to find a way. We're never, we're really there to protect our workforce and our culture. And a lot of that is just by redirecting funds. And so what we do is we look at pots of money. Jessi and I sit there and we go, okay, well, this position's been open for 2 years. Why don't we invest that here? And that's my decision. So I'll decide that. And if that fails, then that's on me. But in most cases, I can look at something, I can say, we can use these resources for the next 2 to 3 years for this, and then we'll work on the next sort of stage. And so it really is a question of understanding the degree of turnover that we have in our faculty and staff, and also, how fast we need to be moving forward, right? And the way we move really fast forward is to get federal, grants. We move really fast when grants, and we're really good at that in ag. We get lots of grant money, and we're able to put things around. This was the first time that, that people said, well, we don't really care how good you are. We're just going to take your money. Right. And we've never had that kind of experience. And so that has sent us sort of shockwaves through our campus community. But I do think that it creates an opportunity for us to think differently about, the kinds of things that we could be doing with our time. So, for example, we lost, I think it was 8 million.
Yep.
5 million of that was unspent. And then what happened was we went out last week and we found somebody who wants to give us $300,000 to support program A. Well, that's a different way of doing business, but we knew the community and we said, well, let's go out to these guys and see if they're willing to help us out. And they did, and other universities are doing the same thing. So it's maybe taking a different look at our budget model and diversifying the budget model, but also making sure that when we get federal dollars, we know how we spend them. Right. There's no reason to sit on federal dollars. You need to spend them. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Gene, do you have any practical advice for because we're talking to kind of the research administrators, some of these things are going to be looking different ways, like looking at different funding sources we've never looked at. I actually think kind of on the pre-award side, things might get more challenging as it's just not going to be, hey, we've always done it this way. We've always had this funder. And so people are going to take some more risks. They're going to try some different things. They're going to go after different funding sources. Do you have advice from an administrative view when they're like, oh my gosh, I don't is this okay? Is this not okay? When they have any thoughts around that, how to basically help support as things start shifting? What would you look for?
I think the key thing is to know who to talk to, in terms of when you have questions and myself and Jessi were always available. But for example, one of the things that's happening is when Jessi was talking about, the shifting in the way and where we get money from. The issue with that is that some people are not willing to pay indirect costs. So they don't want to deal with indirect costs. And then we have to know, well, how do we do this? Do we do it as a gift? Do we, are there different things? Could we just put it all in tuition for students? Could we, and there are all these different sorts of models that you kind of understand and learn about over time. But I think the big thing for us is that as we're seeing these challenges, receiving the other types of support or developing those relationships for other types of support are really critical, and it's forcing us to work with partners that we hadn't really worked with before. And so, that's going to take a lot of patience, and it actually, however uncomfortable it is, it takes a lot more time to do that, right? We're used to the standard kind of pipelines and partners that we have, but now we're having new relationships and new partners with people. So that takes a whole nother level of communication, and then, risk. If we're gonna send somebody out to go do something, we have to pay them to do it, but we have to make sure, what's the return on investment? So we have to be very selective in the way we do that. So I think when things come up like that, where you're really kind of wondering, why you're doing something, or in a sense, does this seem like the right thing to do? We can come back and say, well, this has benefited us in this way. Some of them don't work out quite as well, and we say, well, this is where it's failed. But I would say that we really do balance out the risk ratio, in terms of how much of a risk we can take on different programs.
Yeah, and a lot of these people on this call are very much in the weeds of those conversations, right? I'm trying to think of
Well,
just in our college, I'll use us as the
yeah.
example is should we've started asking the question of, yeah, we've always done this, but should we? And there are certain things that we're like, man, that actually, maybe we shouldn't be doing that.
No,
Right.
I mean, one of the things is that, one of the things that historically has been sort of like a kind of a weird conversation that people have is with indirect costs, right? So like, so a professor comes in and says, well, I want to talk to Dr. Gu because I just submitted a proposal. They want to pay 10% IDC and the university is charging 50% IDC. So the reason that is getting tricky now is that we used to be able to take IDC and then some of that everybody gets their share of that, and then some of it would actually end up back in the department. And that was currency. That was actually like money that the department could spend. The problem with that now is that is being scrutinized by the government and other agencies. So if they come back and they say, well, Gene, you took that indirect cost from that grant and you're paying a faculty member, that's not an indirect cost, that's a direct cost. And so you're not using your indirect cost appropriately. Now, if I took that salary and I put it on an administrative person, I could argue that is a proper use of indirect costs because that's supporting the scientific community, but that's not the way they calculate it, right? They calculate it based on what we're going to spend. And then Jessi and I were saying, well, why don't we just start putting everything into direct cost? So instead of like doing indirect costs, but then a university doesn't want us to do that. They're saying, no, you need to do this model of indirect costs because everybody gets their slice of the pie. But the indirect cost is the one I think is the most, that's like the slippery slope. I think we need to be really careful about that. Like in terms of like when we have a return in indirect costs, like we were instructed by the upper administration, do not use that to support people in this interim, because if we get audited again on that, they're going to say, well, that's not what indirect costs is supposed to be used for. Right. And so that, we're not here to make money, right? We're here to just serve the public. So anyway, so that's a challenging one.
And indirect costs, we just talked about this in the last session with the concept of, hey, let's cut them all to basically 15%. Indirect costs in general are a hot topic, huh?
Oh, God. Yeah. And so that's particularly now with this transition, it's just dangerous to take indirect costs and spend it on a faculty member or something, or a research associate. If you're going to do it, just roll the dice and maybe put it on an administrative assistant or administrative professional, because that is sort of an indirect cost that doesn't get, included in most grants and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. And I think the other thing that's going to be really challenging based on my experience here today, and from what I know so far over the last month and a half, is the timing. That things are just they're so long. And we finally, we had a proposal funded in January, and Jessi and I just got the budgets, the subawards today, and then we have to adjust everything, and that's not going to get done until the end of May. That's 5 months into the grant, and we started spending money back in January. So what are we supposed to be doing when we have to bill quarterly, right? So it's like,
and we weren't sure we were going to get it right. So you're playing on, I'm not sure, and we're still doing this, and we know we have to do this. So I think the department, I bet there's a lot of people here that are like, oh my gosh, yeah, we do something like that, and we're not totally sure what to do, and how do we go forward? Yeah.
So we sort of took an educated guess, when we got the project. I told Jessi it's going to come. They told me, and then we got the thing today. It's like, oh God, thank God, but you just don't know. Right. And I think that's kind of,
Gene's the only person I'm believing on this. Everybody else, the risk approach is no, you're not spending one thing until we get this. It better be signed, sealed, delivered.
That's because I bully all the directors back here. I said, you either pay me now or I'm not leaving. I'm not going to leave your office without money. So anyway.
Hey, so there's a question in the chat. Generally, federal funding has been very flexible and diverse in what it supports. Nonprofit and commercial entity opportunities seem more defined and less flexible. Does a significant change in the source of funding have potential negative impacts on the university research priorities or focus areas?
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, just in the way that we've been doing business. So, for example, we have scientists who are working with different industry partners, and some of those people are making us sign agreements that say, well, you cannot publish these data for 5 years. And if you have a professor who's trying to get tenure and they're not allowed to publish the data, what's the incentive? I mean, I would say to them, don't take the money. right? But I don't think Cass Mosley would say that, and I don't think the president would say that. But I would say, well, if they're not going to let you publish the data, what's the point, right? And so we have this sort of balancing act where, there is a sort of a business model associated with this, but we have to be really careful what we sign on to, saying, if we're going to take their money, we don't want to be told what to do, right? That's just they're giving us a gift. But some of the we're learning with new partners that they think they should have more agency over what we do with the data, or that they own the data. And now in terms of this idea with AI and everything, it's who owns the data. Nobody knows who. I mean, we don't even have the rules in place for that yet. That who owns the data. Right.
Yeah. Bill Mosley commented that commercial funding tends to come with intellectual property expectations that complicate academic freedom and nonprofit status. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think the other thing, too, that's happening at the university, more so over the last, I would say since Ajay took over for us, like there is this idea that faculty should be commercializing things quicker, pushing things out the door. And that creates an enormous amount of pressure, not only on the faculty member to a certain degree, but on the administrative people. It adds a whole nother layer of administration in that we've never really dealt with before. And that becomes really challenging, not only from the standpoint of developing intellectual property, but the conflict of interest and also the conflict of commitment. And I have to tell you, I spend more time than I've ever. When I was department head, I had 30 or 40 faculty members, right? I had now that I'm doing this research gig, I spend so much time on conflict of interest with people because of taking money from industry. There's an associated cost with that. And it's not just a conflict of interest, it's a conflict of commitment. So who are you working for, Gene? You working for the state, or are you working for Shell Oil, or are you working for, right? So that becomes sort of a real challenge, because then people start questioning the utility of a state university that's taking money from Shell, and I'm spending all my time working for Shell, not teaching classes and doing research that I can publish.
And sometimes it's a real conflict, and sometimes it's a perceived conflict.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we have a lot, like today, I was on this panel, and a lot of people have perceived conflicts about what's going on. They look and go, oh, well, all those guys in Colorado are getting all that climate change money. They must be selling out to, Monsanto or, Shell or Texaco or somebody like that. So, that's another part of it, too, which becomes challenging. And that's and it's stressful. I mean, I can't, there's no other thing. I've never seen the faculty more stressed than I've ever seen them now. I mean, it's really very disturbing. Yeah.
How can you talk a little bit about actually remember, this is gonna be a long time ago. But you've been a department head where you've mentored faculty, but literally like kind of the stress on a faculty of getting going through PNT.
I mean, I think there's sort of like when you come in as a new person into any sort of system, you hope that the system works the way it's supposed to work, right? You're given a roadmap, and they say, okay, you see the street signs as you're going through your academic realm, and it says, okay, publish papers, be a great teacher, raise money, don't piss off department head, be nice to parents, to all these things that a faculty
be really nice to research administrators.
Research administrators, right? Yeah. and I think what it is that I think that faculty in their minds don't feel like they're getting enough support there. I think you guys, administrative people, provide probably more support than the administrators at the universities, because I think a lot of the people that come in are really looking for guidance on how to get things done, and where do I go ahead and submit this, and how do I do travel, and what is this conflict of interest stuff, and what is this, and so I went through that, and it is pretty stressful, because I think a lot of people, particularly now, they're worried that, like, well, if they're going to cut people, they're going to cut the people that aren't tenured, right? They're going to cut the people that don't have and that's a tough situation to be in, when you're coming in, and then also as an administrator, because that's not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be, we stay committed to the mission. Our mission is to my mission is to generate research, do good science, support students, support faculty, make sure we're serving the people of Colorado. And we spend a lot of our time worrying about these other things. And I think faculty sometimes, when they're on that path to tenure and promotion, they forget why they're there. If you just do your job, you'll be fine, right? And that's what I say. Just do your job. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Gene, you said it before, and you kind of alluded to it. I think you do feel like your role as a leader is trying to stabilize and try to assure people of their job, with a lot of people that might be feeling kind of nervous about, hey, with where funding goes, what if this gets cut? How do I feel secure in my job? What would you say? What advice would you give?
I think obviously, like I said before, having effective communication and honest communication with your bosses and your colleagues. But I think that you should understand. I think what I have understood is that the university is this sort of gigantic. It's just this big thing that we're building, and I think that if you think about building a building with bricks, that the administrative support is really the mortar, the thing that connects everything together. So I think that there is a desire to not mess with that, because that works pretty well here at CSU. And I think that is always the scary part. But I think that administrative people that are supporting administrative leads, or people that are supporting administrators. I mean, I think the key thing is that, you're there to kind of provide guidance, but you also have an opportunity, like Jessi. We go to meetings. Jessi has the best ideas about what to do with resources, and how to invest those, and how to critically invest those, and which ones we should cut, and which one. So I think it's like giving people agency and making decisions. And I think that, that's a really powerful thing to do with your administrative team. But I always remember that, our first and foremost, whenever this happens, it's happened before. This is not the first rodeo
Right.
we've been through at this. We always protect staff. It's just not even a question. I mean, I'm not making any commitments, but I'm telling you, I've been through several of these where we had 15% cuts in a year. 15% of our budget got cut, and we just found ways to make everything work, because you know what? We know that that's going to change, and we know that we don't want to have to rebuild the workforce. So we come up with different ways of shifting chairs. Some of this work centralizing things, I don't know if I'm a big fan of that, but we have really talented people, and so we just stay committed to the mission, and I think that will work eventually. But I don't think is it the right time to be doing that? I don't think so.
Yeah,
It's
who
just a
knows?
lot going on, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the number of times that, we're, saying, just stay calm, everyone take a few breaths. This like, well,
Yeah.
and having people that can advocate at certain levels. And even the idea, I think, as Gene was kind of alluding, just the whole idea of centralizing CSU finance and HR and stuff, it's really an emotional topic here. And is it the right time? I mean, we're not going to debate that. We're doing it. But if you having really good relationships with your leaders, that even if you're reporting somewhere else, they got your back inside, is a big deal. And so I think relationships are just pivotal. I think conversations are pivotal. Like you can't, I don't know, we can't talk about these things enough. And we can't support our people enough. Like I think that is something we should say all the time. Like you can't say it enough. So one thing I wanted to kind of get to a little bit of practical application. I'm going to skip over. I was going to do some activities, but we'll skip over that. But one of the things that's been super high stress is in this research environment that's like unprecedented. Like how do we pay? Like, how do you pay your people if you lose funding right away? How do you kind of take really a different eye on appointment types? I mean, unfortunately, some really hard conversations have to be had. And like whether it is new hires, extending appointments, so reappointing things. One of a big thing is how many grad students should we have? How many can we actually afford? What can we project out? And we really can't project a ton out with this. And so I'm kind of guessing a lot of people are in the conversations of, oh my goodness, I just lost all this money. I'm going to have to lay off certain people. How do you do that? None of this is good or easy or anything. But I was going to talk through like, and you guys are going to be asked to put together all these different spreadsheets that have 500 different options. There's probably not a really great option to it. And you're going to be working with someone like Gene, and Gene's going to be like, asking a whole bunch of questions back and looking for, different ways to pivot and different ways to extend funding in different ways. Gene, what would be your advice to basically being in these really hard, I do think like these terminations that are super quick. I mean, this is something we haven't really experienced. And so if you're stuck in the middle of these conversations that involve personnel, what would be your advice to someone kind of in the weeds of how to basically, what would you look for as the leader of what their role is?
Yeah, I think it's like I like the word pivot, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
think what we're having to do, and the other thing we're doing is we're in some cases we're realigning, right? Like, we might
yeah,
be thinking we need to go 10 steps ahead, but because of funding, we're only going to be able to do 2 steps this summer. So what we do is we sort of almost go into a fallow mode where we go, look, the most important thing is to keep people covered. And then look at the responsibilities we have to any funded research. The problem is that a lot of people are saying to me, like, well, I just got to stop work order. So faculty will get it, and they're going to, this is the field season, right? Or they're going to start
yeah,
doing research in the summer, and they just got to stop work order, and then there's no summer salary for them. So they're saying, like, well, what do I do? And I'm like, well, let's redirect your energies toward this, right? Try to find something in their program that we can help them, either say, okay, put a pause on that research grant, and then let's move in this direction a little bit and see if we can find some resources for you to help a couple of people. So what I've been doing is taking faculty and sort of creating sort of alignments with faculty who are very similar in what they do, and then looking for avenues to get funding, for something different, like taking a different look at things. Now, again, this is assuming that things are going to shake out, but we've been doing this with some of these private foundations where we said, hey, look, this is something you guys are interested in water. Do you guys feel like investing in this? And then, we've been getting some commitments. So, I mean, I think the thing is, Jessi, that I think it's more about, I think you can also get lost. I mean, there is this kind of idea that there's a space for time substitution. Like, so, I mean,
yeah,
it's almost sometimes it's okay to pause. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like, not make a decision. Like, sort of say, well, okay, well, we're not going to get this funding for 3 months, but I wouldn't go ahead and start cutting. I wouldn't. I would under this current regime, I would not even think that far ahead. I'm worried about month to month. I'm not necessarily with my, because things are changing. So we had something
yeah,
stopped, and then we got a letter, oh, it's back. And then, and that's not to say that's going to happen everywhere, but you want to be really careful when you start doing, vertical cuts, right? We're not, that's not the way we do things, right? But that's when things will get really deep, right? But I think that as an administrator, we don't really want to overreact. We just kind of sit with it and say, okay, let's just figure out where we are, and we just sort of move people along, move people around, move the chairs around, and then hopefully we look for other opportunities. And that's what we do the whole time. I mean, I'm out looking every week for some other way to get money. Like, I was with a friend of mine,
mhm,
and they was saying, hey, what have you been doing? I said, I'm looking to find $1.5 million. Do you have anybody who can help me do that? Because I need to get that on campus like in the next 3 months. And
like
that's what we're
now,
doing. We're up knocking on doors and pounding the pavement and figuring out, well, we have money left to do this. And then we can coalesce things. And then that gives us, a reservoir for a while, right? And then hopefully things will straighten out, and again, it's a really challenging time. And I understand that it's not the most fun to come to work when you have to worry about this kind of stuff, and, my advice to my staff is let's just stay committed to the mission. Let's have our 5-minute,
mhm,
bitch and moan session in the morning or whatever it is. And then after that, just get back to work, and that's all we can do. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 I do
I mean,
I've used it quite a bit. Like I like power of the pause,
yeah.
because that's a thing right now.
Yeah. You want to see a bunch of depressed people come back here. This
Yeah,
is like, oh man, it is like there
right.
are just people like that are already got their walking papers already. It's sad,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But
totally,
we just
totally.
stay committed to the mission. You just kind of say,
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. And I know that's got to be hard. Yeah.
Gene, you need to tell people where you're at.
I'm at the National Academy of Sciences, and what I do is in my other job, I'm a soil scientist, and so I lead this thing called the National Committee on Soil Sciences. And believe it or not, the National Academy of Sciences was started by Abraham Lincoln. All right. And it was a body, the scientific body to advise the president. So the president could say, oh, I have a math problem. They go to the National Academy of Sciences. The National Academy of Sciences says, oh, I've got Dr. Jan Leach here, who's brilliant in this. Everybody knows, all National Academy members, right? And they advise the president. Well, it's kind of not a big deal right now, right? So nobody really wants that. So they're talking about cutting the funding to this organization, and that influences I mean, everything from psychology to engineering to aerospace, it's all here. And so we had a meeting today to talk about ways that universities could work with the national academies so we might go into a fallow period, but we want to keep the integrity of the groups together so that we have scientists still communicating. So maybe the meetings are not hosted by the National Academy. Maybe they're hosted by CSU or by University of California or by Illinois. But we're thinking of ways to kind of move around or share the responsibility just to keep the scientific integrity of the organization going well. And then tomorrow I'm going over to USDA, where we had a lot of cuts in USDA, and I'm visiting with some of my colleagues from the Forest Service because we're trying to figure out, well, we've had these contracts for a while. Where do you think it's going to go? And it's not like kind of an inside job, but you get a sense when you talk to people like how bad it is, right? And I am not making any predictions, but I can tell you that I was here a month ago and it's different already. So it's already different. Like a month ago, it was like this fear thing. Now people are pissed, right? So now is a whole different vibe here. So people are not afraid anymore. They're getting pissed, right? So it's just changing constantly. And if you think about, you read the paper every day, they add this, they take this away, they add this, they put it back. That's what it's like here. And these, so it's been really challenging for a lot of these folks. For being here, it's hard because you want to be careful about the way you couch things and share. I don't give it. I'm never going to go back and say, well, this is what's going to happen. Don't worry about it. But that's why we come back. We come back and we say, well, what do you think is really going on? And it's a little bit. It was really unpredictable about 2 months ago. It was a little less predictable about a month ago. And now it's getting somewhat predictable. So having been back here a lot, I just see something shifting. There's like a shift going on. I don't know what it is. It could be heartburn. I went to a Greek restaurant last night, but I think it's actually just, I think there's a little bit of a shift in the tolerance of the workforce. And now this decision making is becoming problematic in that it's on and off all the time. And I have to tell you, you guys know more than anybody, on and off costs a lot of money. That's a waste of money. On and off, man. Bad idea. Right? Yeah,
not to even talk about the psychological and stress factor of that.
Yeah,
right?
I'm just talking about the finances.
Yeah,
I mean,
just
the psychology is even worse. But
yeah, totally. Is it, because I know one thing we've talked about a ton, especially since you, Carolyn, and Amy went, like really trying to get our researchers to understand how to do their essentially elevator pitches and do the impact. Like no one cares about the words that we can't understand and say. Right. But do you feel like in DC, like impact matters, or do you think, or will it, or is that something to focus on?
I think it's still important. I mean, we had a discussion today on how do you translate science. So I do that with the American Association for the Advancement of Science, is that I don't give talks anymore. They don't allow me to talk to other scientists now. I talk to reporters and journalists. And so we had a meeting today where we're planning a meeting, and there's going to be 5,000 people there, and 4,000 of them are going to be journalists, right? And writers. And so it's a different way of communicating our work. And so what we're trying to do is to get scientists to think more about the impact of what they're working on, even if it's not finished yet. We should say, well, what are you working toward? Well, I'm really working on the work I'm doing is going to support is going to help reduce chronic diseases, right? All that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the way we're thinking very differently. And it's hard to retrain people that have been doing something for a long time. So we spend a lot of time on that. But I do think that's important for scientists to be able to communicate their work in a very sort of a general way. And today the discussions were about how to use technology like large language models and AI and all that kind of stuff. So that was, it was kind of fun. Anyway.
Yeah. How do you stay positive in this sort of environment? I mean, you are naturally a positive person though, so.
Yeah, I think I'm just so shallow and superficial. It doesn't really bother me so much. So I'm like, I sort of don't. I'm just kidding. I always tell people it doesn't bother me because I'm really shallow and superficial. So I'm not, but my point is, I think what it is that I feel I embrace it, I understand it, and then I realize what can I do about it, and all I can do is control me. right? All I can do is control my emotions. I can't control anybody else's. So I just work on myself. And even though I'm feeling something that might not feel so good, when I'm with other people, they're probably feeling the same way. And I just want to make sure that they understand that I'm there. I'm here for them. You know what I mean? I'm not like, I mean, when I leave work, like now, it's just different. I go home and I'm like, I shut the door. I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk to anybody. I've been out with people all day and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that we all support each other, and then we do need to be optimistic. We're really blessed to be doing what we do. I would never, ever not say that, but it is challenging. And I know that it's not an easy time, but I really believe, I really believe in, the principles of the academy and higher education. So I do think that, we have a really specific and important role in society and in culture. And I can't, and for the life of me, ever seeing that go away. I mean, I think they're trying to diminish it now, but it's just too important. If you think about all the revolutions and evolutions we've had over the last 40 years, probably older than most of you people. When we had anti-war demonstrations and civil rights demonstrations, those all happened at universities. They weren't out, and they were all at these. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And I don't want us to lose the sense of what is important. And I think we should be able to do that, right? So, but we have to be careful now, and for some, in some cases. But I think that's our job. And you guys are a bigger part of that than we are. In terms of faculty, we're all in it together. I mean, we all get involved in these things, and so I think as a community, we really need to stick together. I'm agnostic when it comes to, I don't know. It's just different. I think we're really lucky to where we work. I've been at it for so long. I don't see the difference between, I really mean this. This sounds really weird. You might think I'm senile, but I don't think there's a difference between like one of the people in ABC and, the dean. I view them as the same. I look at them, they're the same people. They both have blood and flesh and skin, and then really smart. I don't see this hierarchy,
Gene, that's because we change deans every 4 years. So you're like, wait, I know these people.
Keep the dean at least 3 years this time, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
No, but I think it's a good way to be, and I think universities allow us to, be able to sort of work with everybody. And like I said, I think the important thing for us is to make sure we're getting in, seeing people, getting energized by people, supporting others, and I think that's really a way through that. I mean, I really believe that. I mean, I really, really believe that. And my goal, Jessi, I don't know if she told you, like, my colleague and I, Troy Bowder, we look at it and we think, well, this year we got to really hit the road, because we got to get out and see all of our people out in the state, spend time with them, reinforce them, go talk about the way things are going to be, and then get back to work. So, and if I'm out there working with them, they'll work. They say, well, what are these two guys here doing? We go down and we work with them, because that's what we're supposed to be doing. But I do think it's really about being able to share with people and support other people. I really mean that. I think it's really important. Yeah.
And staying,
I would tell you, I have way more faculty come in, and I mean, I don't mean this in a weird way, but I'm just saying some of the faculty come in and they're just like freaking. You know what I mean? Like freaking out. The staff is more even keeled. And I'm not saying, I just think that we all need to help each other. So if a faculty member comes in freaking out, and, Jessi is the best person to talk to, she goes, yeah, we'll do this. I think there's some power there, and the power we all have is to support each other. We all know what's going on, but we just need to find a way forward, and we can do that collectively. It's not going to be one person. President Parsons is not going to figure this out. No, it's everybody's going to figure it out, right?
Yeah. I really like, Gene, you've said it a couple different times, but really being grounded in the mission.
Yeah.
Like that's a really big deal in any times of turmoil and change and stuff. And knowing why you're there, like purpose is the thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like, I think when you're grounded, it allows you to, when like CSU, we're really good. We're really rooted in the land grant, right? Like this is what we do. And so, and I mean this in a weird, not in a weird way, but in a very real way, in that, then we're out with our stakeholders and there's nothing to worry about. We just do our job. You know what I mean? So when you're really grounded in what you do, you're able to move ahead and take risks, because you can go back to a solid foundation. And I think we're lucky about that at CSU, that we, in a sense, we have a foundational sort of aspect of the university. And I think we protect that. That's what we really want to do. And I think our leadership really values that as well. So I do think we're solid there. We just don't have a lot of cushion coins. We don't have a lot of spare change
Right.
in the couches, so, although
We
I'm
are
always
very
looking,
lean. Yeah.
although I'm always looking, but anyway, but there really isn't a lot. And so that's kind of why we're different than a lot of other schools. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
So, Gene, when you're out and about in Colorado rural areas, do you hear support for the work, priorities, educational outcomes,
oh,
research that CSU is doing?
yeah, oh, totally. I mean, and I think what we don't want to get into the habit of saying, oh, everything sucks on campus and we're losing all this money. I mean, I don't share that with anybody. I'll let them, if they want to bring it up, they can bring it up. I just say, yeah, I'm here to work on, A, B, C, and D this week. If I show up, they usually know there's something wrong. So they think somebody's in trouble and all that. But I just, the stakeholders, I generally don't, but they really do appreciate the work we do. And they say it all the time. And, I don't understand this. I mean, I get it, this whole urban rural divide, but when I'm out there, we're all the same. We really are. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know anything to say. I mean, I can't, I don't, I think we can prepare, we can use that as an excuse not to get things done, but I see it as an opportunity, and we're with the rural communities, James and I, all the time, and so, I think but there's just, we have different sorts of funding priorities in Colorado, and unfortunately, higher education isn't further up the list. We're there, but we're not at top, right? And that's kind of one of the challenges we had, and we've always had good leadership to help us through that.
Yeah. And we've been here long enough to know like that rural urban thing, and institutional memory is just long. It's really, really long, and being able to change that and change the narrative. I mean, it really is a little bit of a couple steps forward, couple, 10 steps back, couple more steps forward type of approach.
The best metaphor I heard is that these universities are like these big ships, and you can't just make a right-hand turn, right? It's like 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, and that's what we do,
literally the
right?
Titanic, yes.
Yeah, it's like, so we just want to avoid the icebergs, right?
Exactly.
Right?
Okay. So a couple people have been using the chat for questions, but please, if you'd like to unmute or put something in the chat, we really want you to be able to ask some questions of someone who's going to be really candid.
I have a question. Just listening to all of this, and it's kind of, so we were talking about different funding sources and looking at different funding sources. We talked about the fact that faculty are freaking out. So that puts me in mind in kind of a practical advice or potentially conversations with leadership that need to happen, is that we as research administrators, either in the department or at OSP, sometimes have to be the gatekeepers and have to be telling faculty no. And during these times of really high stress and emotions being high, how do you suggest that people deal with potentially, backlash or, high emotions or,
super hard conversations that come
super
with
hard
everything
conversations
you're saying.
Because we still have a job that we have to do. There's still compliance that we have to follow. And we're talking about some of these funding sources that could get interesting. And
you all care deeply. I know.
And we all care deeply, but
yeah, I think what I've done, and this is just not recent, but Jessi will tell you that I do this. We sit in a place where, and we're, in our college, we're really open. We have the doors are open. People just walk in, and a faculty member could walk in and say, hey, I lost all my funding. I need somebody to help me pay this graduate student. And when I go, I say, look, I totally get it, but this is only going to work if you work through your department head. Because what happens is that if it comes to me directly, I don't have any agency. Because if I say, yeah, I'll give you this, I would never do this. But if I said, yeah, I'll give you this, your department is going to come back to me and say, well, how do you know that that was my priority? What if that wasn't my priority, right? So what I try to do is to make sure that we keep the lines of communication open. I don't have a problem with anybody coming to me and asking me any question about anything. But I tell them that when I have to make a decision, I have to go through the chain of command. So if you want something, you need to go through your department head, and then that needs to come from the department head to Jessi and I, because we have 50 people coming into our offices, right? And we want to take care of everybody. But I think that also alleviates the burden on you guys. In other words, that it's really not, in some places, I think people overstep by going to administrative person and saying, well, wait a minute. It's like for example, I'm just my
overstep.
View.
Yes.
They overstep. I would never want my faculty when I was department head, I didn't want my faculty talking to sponsored programs unless it was something very specific, like about, well, you didn't turn this paper in, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. There's no reason for a faculty member to be talking to OSP about indirect cost and negotiating that. I mean, that's not
Or complaining about anything.
or complaining about it. So I think that faculty and we all need to know what are the right channels for getting things done. And while we're doing that, supporting each other, not just saying, oh, go out the door, you shouldn't talk to me, but talk, hear them out, do all this kind of stuff. And you say, well, let me go through this, but you should go talk to Chris about that, or Noah, or go talk to Dean Lawrence Dill, and I think that is the way to do it, rather than sort of trying to solve everything, right? I think it's being in here first, thinking about it, and then saying, look, I don't know if I have the agency to do this, but I could tell you if you went back to your department head and said this, and I always think that department heads are really department heads are really good. I was only kidding about. I mean, it's a really hard job, but
it is a hard job. Yeah,
it is a really hard job, and I just think that they are the ones who kind of keep the steady hand, right? Like they're the ones who understand the direct impact of this on students and on teaching faculty, which is what we really need to protect. So I really encourage faculty to work through their administrative units in the department, and I'm more than happy. You ask Jessi, I go to any department meeting they want me to go to. I'll be there as long as the department head's there. I go and I'll sit. They can ask me any questions they want, but the department head needs to be the voice for the department, right? That's what their job is, right?
So what you basically just said, Gene, is a really good relationship with the department head is pivotal.
That's critical. Yeah.
Yeah. To be able. And you don't want, I think where we get stuck in kind of these service roles is you want to, well, you care deeply, you want to bend over backwards, figure it all out. And certain times it's just not possible. And you're like, what the heck do I do?
Right.
And, I think that if that relationship's built and that trust is there, then really who you call in is a department head. And then it starts working through things. But I don't think everyone, I think that's hard. I think that's way easier said than done.
Right. And then I think also there's something about people being heard, right? And they just want to be heard by somebody. And you know what I mean? And so I think and I think that as a department head, I had to work on that. Like you assume when somebody comes in to see you that people have problems, like everybody's got issues and problems, and that's what you're there for. You're not there. Nobody's going to come in and say, hey man, I'm just having the greatest day of my life. I just wanted to come in and say hi. Right. I don't think I've ever had that. So I think people come in because they have problems and issues, and you just got to understand that's why they're there. Right.
Yeah.
And they're not looking for solutions. They're just looking for an ear. Right.
Yeah. And it is hard because we don't have buckets of cash that we can throw at everyone to just help everything.
And
most of the time it's not
answer. Money is not always the answer. There's sometimes we can be creative about solving problems, but money is important. But I think a lot of it is that just being important, recognizing how important everybody's program is, and then having that conversation, I think makes it easier.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking along the lines of compliance and federal and funding types, how do departments balance taking risks and being risk adverse with thinking out of the box for seeking funding opportunities? Let's see, the research admin has been encouraged to maintain compliance and protect the university, while the department head and PI may be trying to just get the next dollar in the door.
There's a bit of this going on, right? Yeah.
Oh, this is an everyday conversation.
Yeah. I mean, again, this was like, you look at that example I gave you earlier about commercializing things and talking to companies and doing all that. And then, you say, oh, I want to work at this company. Say, well, we really can't work with them because they're not a vendor, or we can't do this with them, or and so I think that's you guys have to toe the line in terms of that, because that's, compliance is, as critical, right? I mean, that's just like, we cannot cross the line, right? And I think that's a hard thing to do. And so I think that some people just think that, well, this doesn't seem fair and all that, but the rules are the rules, and we have to sort of play by those. And that's what I tell everybody. We spend most of our time trying to stay out of trouble, right? We're always trying
to. It's a really hard, and it's a really hard best practices thing. Because there's personalities that come in, and there's historical. Like some just have really what applies to one person might not apply to the other on certain things, just because they built some sort of back end relationship. But and we've talked about this a little bit, like people are wanting to think outside the box on different funding things. I mean, we've also thrown around the idea, just throw down a hat and let's just have, let people donate. Who knows what else we're going to do, right? But that anytime we're talking, so you can tell really closely if a PI's talking with like a company that's just kind of trying to throw something at the wall and see what sticks kind of thing. That conversation of, wait, do you trust us enough to give a gift is a thing. And then when they come back with, I don't know, say it like, if development's on here, foundation relations or anything, then it comes back with like a 30-page document that has a whole bunch of terms and conditions on the gift. And you're like, oh yeah, that's going to be, these things are really complicated. And I think one of the cool things about kind of RAM Symposium and about having other people you can ask is it is that complicated that what we think is going to work this way, there might be a few iterations down and a lot of behind the scenes back and forth that goes, never mind, that can't happen.
It's always more complicated. It's always more complicated. Yeah. It's always more complicated.
Yeah, and I do think we have a lot of people at the university. I mean, we do get compliance. I'm not saying we do everything perfectly and that we have systems that all align with all the different things and different things happen. But we do need faculty, administrators, new people coming in, like getting people connected and having them talk. And like at the end of the day, there sometimes is like someone's going to have to say no to something that's like, actually, that's not doable. There's no way we can accept these terms and conditions. There is no way you're going to meet those deliverables. And that can involve a lot of different people. I mean, I think the RAD of your areas are really, really important. They get kind of involved and in the weeds on some of this. But what ends up happening is really what's the best way to say no does become a thing. So, and I think what's hard is a lot of you guys are in positions where you bear the brunt of it. And it's just a hard thing to do. And what I'd hope is that people have support in a whole bunch of different ways that at least maybe you have to deliver bad news, but hopefully you have the support for being able to do that. The last thing I was going to end with, and I'm not even going to go back to the slides because we ended up going all over, but really kind of leaning in and knowing, I love the concept of purpose, mission, values, and being rooted in that, and understanding of we can only control what we can control. We get pulled into so many different conversations that at the end of the day, they just suck our energy. And sometimes we need to be in those, but take care of yourself and know, maybe, try to figure out tools of how to place those and how to get through it. And it's super important just to build relationships and trust with whoever your supervisor is and the other leadership around. And like whatever avenues that you can try to, go up the chain, as Gene was saying, you do have a very unique perspective, and you need, if there is something not working or problematic or it doesn't sit right with you, it's good to say something. Because it probably is problematic. Gene, do you have any last final words?
No, I was really, this was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. Not that I didn't know what to expect, but
we are fun.
No, I mean that. I didn't mean it that way. I didn't know who it was. And now I'm really happy that it was something like this, because I really, I love staff, and I just kind of, think you guys are great. And it's a hard job, and we're all just trying to do our best. And Jessi and I are resources for anything. It doesn't matter what department you're in or college, just come on over or drop us an email or something like that. And more than happy to talk things through,
And Gene, thank you for basically doing this blindly.
Yeah, I'm going to go for a run on the National Mall right now. I'm going to see.
Nice.
I'm going to go see if I got a lot to do tonight, but I'm going to go for a run rather than go out and have drinks.
Yeah, you need to go do that. Yeah, go for a run.
Anyway,
yeah,
all right.
That's a way. Okay, thank you all.
All right, guys. Thank you, everybody. Good seeing everybody. Be safe. Bye.
Thank you. And I want to thank Jessi and Gene for doing this for us today, and for all of you who have attended.
Thank you, guys.
you.